Hey folks, welcome back. This is the mother city of Cape Town. I'm here with Matthew Parks from COSATU. I bet some of you never thought I'd ever have a conversation with a representative of COSATU. But Matthew and I are talking about the trade relationship between the United States and South Africa. And both of us have some concerns there, and I think COSATU is trying to help the government and help South Africa sort this mess out. Matthew, it's a pleasure to chat with you this morning.
It's good to have you here.
Well, thanks a lot. So what are some of the concerns that COSATU has?
I think number one, we have an unemployment rate of 41%. That's a ticking time bomb. We've got an economy.
That's the official unemployment rate.
Yeah, and even that's got a lot of issues within it. Not great jobs. We've got an economy growing 1% per annum for the past decade.
Which is less than inflation.
And not enough to create the jobs to absorb young people coming into the economy every year. We've got public services, whether it's public service departments or municipalities or state-owned enterprises are really struggling. So we've got so many difficult problems. And I think our thing is that, well, let's not add to this problem, see how to fix them, but we've got to keep people working. And key to that is having good trade relations with countries around the world, especially the big industrial economies, like the United States, our second biggest trading partner, a major source of investment.
And historically, the largest trading partner for decades, until China surpassed us about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and just like we're going to have good relation with the European Union, we're going to have good relation with China, India, and so on, Africa. But the US is also, it's a good investor. It's a value-added investment. So it's a Ford Motor Company creating good jobs, assembling cars here.
Well, let me interrupt you for a second, Matthew. Sorry, but I think that's a good point, because we talk about benefication, I guess is the term people like to use. So if you're shipping commodities like coal to another country, say China, those things fluctuate. Commodity prices go up and down. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But also, you're not getting in the value-added chain.
Yep.
Whereas with producing BMWs and Fords here in South Africa, you have parts manufacturers who are South African, you have distributors who are South African, you have auto workers who are South African. You get the whole benefication of the final product, and that value chain stays in South Africa. I think that's the point you made. So Matthew, you touched on something a moment ago, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. And the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act is something the Clinton administration introduced in their dying days, and it was signed into law in 2000. So it's been around for 25 years. It gets renewed every 5 years. It's a matter of public law in the U.S. And for those who don't know, the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act gives African countries that agree to certain governance standards, and we're not intruding in their governance, but say, look, if you spend money on education and healthcare for your citizens and have rule of law and respect property rights, then we'll grant you duty-free access for certain goods and services. It's been very beneficial, and South Africa's been one of the biggest beneficiaries over the years. Most recently, it's about $2.9 billion of your trade has gone duty-free into the United States. Give you an artificial advantage, but you're not the only one. It's in Africa. Sure. But the problem with AGOA is that there doesn't seem much interest in Congress at renewing it this year. It runs out in 30 September, and I don't even know if there's a bill in place right now. So the key, I suppose, for South Africa is to find a bilateral trade relationship potentially with the United States that would be beneficial to South African workers and to America.
Yeah, and so whether it's AGOA or it's a new trade relationship, when you engage people in Congress, they seem to be keen on AGOA being renewed, but they also said, look, ultimately it's the administration's call. I think the Trump administration more of a preference for bilateral trade agreements, which is fine. We think there's space to have it. We can't afford 30% or 10% tariff duties. We can't afford 25% on our car exports. But we think there's plenty of space to have a win-win positive relationship. We export a lot of minerals to the US, benefits US factories. We're keen to continue to do so. Good jobs for South African mine workers. We're keen to see how the address irritants historically around US exports to South Africa, whether it's on poultry, it's on pork, some of the phytosanitary issues, or blueberries. How can we address that issues? We're keen because if we listen to President Trump, he speaks about the trade deficit the US has with many countries.
Yes.
We understand that. So are there products in the US that the US produces that we don't produce that we can buy?
That wouldn't compete with your local market.
Exactly.
Like maybe certain semiconductors we produce.
Or green machinery, John Deere.
John Deere will love that.
We actually thought John Deere was a South African company. We never knew it was a
it's funny you should say that, because years ago I met a young man whose father worked for John Deere in Germany, and a lot of Germans thought John Deere is a German company. I'm like, how do you get that? That's not even remotely German. But yeah, no, it's an American company, and it's a big company. Caterpillar's another one.
And so also, like, other things the US produces, LNG gas.
Yes.
So one of the things the US exports that we don't produce, can we buy that to address the trade deficit? Make sure that we can continue to address the US irritants around US exports getting access to our markets, but also see in exchange, can we also look at South African investments to the US, which we do a lot of. Sasol in Louisiana, Sibanye in Montana, Nando's, which has 70 restaurants in the US. What are the kind of smart things we could do which makes sense for America first agenda about getting jobs and invest in the US? Can also create export opportunities for South Africa to the US. But we want a package that makes sense to the US consumer, the US worker, the US businessman, to the US administration, makes sense for South African counterparts too. And in exchange, can we retain access for our agricultural goods? We produce almost every.
Get the car tariff removed.
Car tariff, because our car tariffs couldn't sustain 25%.
No.
And we don't think it's a threat to the US market. That's a global kind of position by the Trump administration, but let's have a win-win.
But you could work a bilateral agreement potentially with the US that would eliminate that.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, let's be honest here, I mean, 25,533 cars from South Africa is not exactly breaking the bank for the US auto market. We sell 16 to 20 million motor vehicles per year in the United States. And so that's just a drop in the bucket. And if South Africa could get trade negotiators into DC and work out a bilateral deal with the US, maybe that can go away and your cars can continue. And that would give you an advantage over the people who don't get that agreement.
Exactly.
You got to be a first mover.
Because exactly, that's the point. Because right now other countries are not sleeping. They're moving correctly, so whether it's the Vietnamese, whether it's the Mexicans,
South Koreans, the Japanese.
We got to be there quickly. And we're convinced it can be done. And it can be done in a way in which it has to be in a way which is mutually beneficial. It has to make sense for US factories, for US workers in the industrial states of Ohio, Michigan. Because we understand the issues that Trump is raising. They're the same issues we experience of deindustrialization, of losing good jobs.
Isn't that interesting? So, South African America have much in common. People often just look right past this.
Yeah.
Many things in common. For instance, we're talking about here deindustrialization. That's been happening in America for 50 years. And it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary for it to happen in South Africa. Both countries are facing the same challenge. Another reason maybe we can work together.
Exactly. We've been seeing the last 30 years that we've deindustrialized. We've lost a huge chunk of our clothing capacity.
Shoes, apparel, gone.
We don't want to lose our motor manufacturing capacity. So we've got Ford as a major. Ford is
BMW.
But Ford especially seen as almost as a South African company.
I know. A lot of South Africans think the Ford Ranger. They think it's a South African company. It's not.
And, and in recent years, there's been expansion where the South African government working with Ford has helped to expand capacity here. But I think we've got to move fast. Life is in a vacuum. If you don't move fast, if you sleep on a job, we'll lose an opportunity, and then there'll be huge consequences. But I mean, so for example, the president of our trade union, COSATU, she started off her career working for Motor Plant in the Eastern Cape.
So she's got a vested personal interest in that success.
The biggest trade in the country, metalworkers union, is Anchor, is Ford, is Mercedes, is BMW, they're linked to the US trade market. So we've all been quite anxious, but I think look, part of our discussion with the US Congress for the past couple of years, the US administration, is actually the US colleagues have told us, don't be so unambitious. How can a grower, or whatever a poster grower looks like, can it be more ambitious? Can it actually help create jobs in South Africa, help create jobs in the US, help create integration in Africa and development? We've been saying, for example, can we have a discussion about how do you help African countries to go almost no trade of the US? It might be because they don't have access to ports, or to rail, or to roads, or to water. They might not even know about opportunities to export that they have to Georgia or to South Dakota. So can it be smart in a way which actually helps unlock?
Well, I mean, you and I were talking earlier. I don't know their capital. I don't know if they have the resources, but I'm a big fan of Energade, or Energade, as some people say here. People know I drink it by the gallons or liters when I'm here. I'm sure it's probably got some residual effects in my body somewhere, hopefully beneficial. But maybe a company like that might take on, Gatorade in the States. I mean, that might be an opportunity. It might be a niche opportunity for a South African company like that, or freedom of movement. Yep. Freedom of movement. The Fellies makers, the Feldskona. Maybe there's a market in the U.S. I mean, I buy a pair every time I come here. I'm a walking billboard, by the way, freedom of movement, just in case you don't know that. But yeah, those might be opportunities.
Or even Cape Union March. It's a good hiking company.
It is. That's a tough sector to get into, Matthew. We've had Gander Mountain, and we've had Cabela's, and we've had Bass Pro Shops, and a lot of them folded up, particularly during COVID. But post-COVID, it might be a sector they can get back in, because Cape Union Mart is not just outdoor stuff, it's also adventure stuff. So the point you're making is that there may be opportunities here for growth that South African companies are missing or overlooking, and maybe in this relationship, as we improve it, it's a good thought. Let me ask you this before we wrap up. So, COSATU, major trade union, it's an amalgamation of multiple unions are part of it, and you're known for representing the interests and rights of labor, of workers. Do you have influence with the government? I mean, I don't want to put you on a limb there. You don't have to state if you do, but I mean, if what you and I have just talked about sounds like something most people want to hear.
Yep.
Most people. So was that the noonday? No, it can't be. That was too early. Somebody dropped something. Oh, it's a noonday gun. It's only 10 o'clock. Anyway, but so most people probably want to hear this conversation. Does the government want to hear this conversation?
They do. So we've been worried about the relationship with the U.S. for the past couple of years, since about 2022, when they thought, even under the Biden administration, there was irritants in our relationship.
Yeah, this dispute predates Trump. A lot of people keep making the mistake that it's all about Trump. It's not about Trump, is it?
It was there before.
Yeah.
And whether it was the war in Ukraine, or whatever it is, or the Middle East conflict, it's been there. And a crisis can be a good thing. It forces us to wake up because there's irritants. Because you can't just continue.
Well, there's plenty of irritants to address.
But look, we were working close with the government. We work close with the colleagues in business.
Okay.
Because ultimately we want to see positive trade relations. We want to see US investors coming here. We want to see South African investors in the US. We want to see jobs on both sides. And when you have a 40% unemployment rate, we can't afford to lose a single job. So the government does listen to us. The president of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, was actually a founding father of COSATU when he was in the mine workers union. Minister of Finance also comes from Metal Workers Union, which organizes a Ford and so on. And again, we talk to our colleagues in business. We want business to do well because if they make profits, that means workers have jobs, it means workers will get paid.
Job creation, more money to the economy, more employment, better standard of living, more revenue for the government to provide services.
Yeah, and just like going a healthy relationship with the US, we don't want just to say let's go. We actually want to take it to the next level.
Okay.
The trade should actually be expanded. We shouldn't just be celebrating 600 US companies here. It should actually be a couple thousand.
Yeah,
this
I
is not a
like
small
the sound
economy.
of that.
And so I think even when we look at the America First agenda, when you look at it, we're like, well, that actually sounds like a COSATU agenda.
Yeah, South Africa first, America first. You got the same things in mind.
It's actually the same
And
thing.
you've got the same challenges in the labor market with illegal immigration, undermining wages and lowering wages and things like that.
Yep.
So it sounds like there's an awful lot in common between the United States and South Africa, which a lot of people aren't really noticing.
So Trump speaks to the issue of drug smuggling in the US. Well, we have a similar problem here. So I think there's space to collaborate. I think there's a lot in common we have with each other. I think often because our politics is noisy, democracy is very noisy. Our democracy is extremely noisy. I suspect the US democracy might be a little bit noisy too.
Yeah, we get noisy at times as well. It's we resemble that comment.
And often we don't listen to each other.
Yeah.
And actually, if we spend a little bit more time listening to each other, we actually realize, well, actually, the issue are not that complicated to resolve. We just spend a little bit of time listening to each other. We think we could resolve the issues. We were quite glad when our president spoke to President Trump this past week to signal that we support the US efforts to negotiate a resolution to the war in Ukraine. And that benefits South Africans, benefits Ukrainians and Russians, benefits Americans. We think that if the US is able to resolve issues with Iran, we saw yesterday President Trump hosted the Rwandese and the Congolese. Again, that speaks to a similar agenda. We want an end to conflict so we can actually focus on useful things like promoting trade, promoting investment, promoting jobs. We think there's a lot of space. We have a lot of US students come to South African universities for a gap year. We'd be keen to see more South Africans actually go to the US. Also,
Yeah, that's actually a good idea as well.
Exchanges. We'd be keen to see South African military personnel go to some of the US. Vice versa. I think there's so many different ways we can actually build relationships once you're going to get back to the current kind of moment of silliness, if I can put it that way.
The own goals.
We specialize, if there was an Olympic medal for own goals, we'd take it.
You get Olympic medal for own goals. Well, Matthew, so I'd have to say this. You don't represent the government of South Africa. I don't represent the American government. But I would argue, I think fair point, if you disagree, tell me, our conversation off camera and in the past hour plus, if we were negotiating on behalf of the United States and South Africa, I think we'd have a tentative agreement on how we could fix things right now.
I think we over coffee quickly.
We solved it. So get with it, South Africa. Get with it, Washington. Solve this problem because it's not insurmountable.
It's easy to, and it's nice that it can be mutually beneficial. I think what Trump is saying, and often people get psyched by the theatrics. His theatrics are not different than our theatrics. As a trading movement, we also go over the top and make a lot of noise. Then we want to do a deal.
Yeah, you do the deal quietly behind the scenes. You make the noise in front of the cameras.
It's part of the dance.
It is, and people forget that. There is a diplomatic dance. I did an artificial intelligence song with the lyrics recently, and that's one of the lines in it, the diplomatic dance in the dark moonlight, because that's what happens. Well, Matthew Parks, it's a pleasure chatting with you. We'll have to do this again.
Yep.
I want to thank you for your time, and thanks for sharing with the audience, and hopefully people take something useful from this. Latuli House, Parliament, are you listening? This is fixable. Let's fix it. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Chris.